Welcome to Learnowledge. Today we're going to be learning what is property binding in Angular. So we'll be discussing what is property binding, how we can bind an HTML elements with Angular variable, how we can use interpolation with property binding, and at the end we'll have a quiz. So let's just jump to the code. So the property binding in Angular, it's a feature that lets you connect the dot between your HTML DOM and your variables. That basically means like you can connect and you can bind your HTML elements to any of the Angular variables. So let's just write one input. Let me just remove this one. My input one. So input tag, it's basically a HTML for your user input. So let's make it a text and let's just save it. Now ng serve hyphen open. Let's just give it a minute. It's done. So you see we have an input tag here, my input one, and if you open it in the console, you see it's a small or regular HTML tag. So what we can do is like we can give some ID to it. Let's say ID. Let's save it. And if we again look into this, so we see like the ID of this particular element is ID. To bind this ID, what we need to do, just add the square bracket before and after of your element property, and you can give it a angular variable. So it says my ID, and we need to create a similar variable into our and TypeScript. So it would be like my ID string hello. To save it. So you see we are getting a hello here as part of ID. So this is how you can bind your HTML properties with your Angular variable. So let's just play around a bit. So let me just copy this one, and let's put some BR tags here. Let's just name it my input 2, and we can use some other properties as well. Like, I mean, there are various properties like disabled. So if you write this disabled, then your tag will be disabled on your HTML. So to bind this, just need to put put it between the square bracket and bind it to a variable input disabled, and let's just create the input disabled variable into a TypeScript. Make a type of boolean. Let's make it true. So we are making this input disabled to true, and we are binding this disabled property to this variable. So let's just save it. So you see we have this input to as disabled. Now let's just change it to false. After refresh, you see our disable input tag is enabled now after we change the property in Angular. And also you can use interpolations. Let's just copy this one. Let's just name it my input 3, and we have added a not symbol here. So it will Angular will initialize this input disable and check its input, and accordingly it will negate that. Let's just save it. So you see my input 2 is enabled and my input 3 is disabled. So let's just reverse the polarity, make it true. So you see our my input 2 is disabled now and my input 3 is enabled. So this is how you can control your HTML elements and its properties using Angular variables. We have various other properties that we can bind of HTML. Let's just copy this. So we have value property in HTML input. So we can manipulate that value property. So let's just remove this part. So value, if you just give it a value like hello world, let's just save it. Then your input initial value will be defined as hello world. Now let's just wrap it around the square bracket and assign one variable, my value. Create my value in your TypeScript. Hello Jack. Just save it. So you see our hello world has been changed from hello Jack. So this is how you can manipulate and control your HTML value and bind those elements with your Angular variables. So that's all for today. We do have a one quiz today. Let's just jump to that. So what will be the value in browser after running below code? So we have a button here and we are using a binding of disabled to false, and also we are using HTML default disabled. So what should be the output? You're right. The option 2 is the correct answer. The reason is the Angular binding is overriding your HTML properties. So that's all for today. Thank you. Please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and you can leave your queries in the comment section.